In the Chapter 4, Part 3 of the notes, we will talk about biodiversity. Biodiversity is categorized into different areas. The first is abundance. This is the total number of organisms in a biological community. We can measure this by their primary productivity. This is the rate of biomass produced by the producers in the ecosystem. It's an indicator of how much solar energy is actually captured and converted by producers. The fact that only 1/4 of the sunlight reaching the plants on Earth is actually used for photosynthesis means that primary productivity depends on that 1/4. Light levels vary depending on the producer and the ecosystem. The next thing when we look at biodiversity is actual diversity. This is the number of different species, niches, or genetic variation in an ecosystem. We measure this by complexity. Complexity shows the number of species at each trophic level and the number of trophic levels in a food chain or food web in the ecosystem. If there are many species at the same trophic level, it leads to simple food chains and low complexity, whereas diverse food chains that have many species at many different levels increase resilience and stability of the ecosystem. This is where diversity and abundance are different. Abundance just means a great number, but diversity means a variety. Ecological structure. When we look at an ecosystem and we look at the diversity, we also look at the patterns of the organisms living in that ecosystem. This is the spatial distribution of the individuals in a population or a community. These can be categorized in 3 different ways: random distribution, uniform, and clustered. Random is when organisms are spread out in no specific manner. They could be found clumped together, where groups stay in the same area, but they're randomly spread out throughout the population and the community. Uniform is when individuals are spread out with about the same amount of space in between each, giving each other room to grow. Sometimes trees grow in uniform fashion because they all need a specific amount of space to grow. The last one is clustered. This is when organisms will all live in the same area together. An example of a clustered population is the human population. Our human population is drastically increased on coastal and in main city areas. This shows a clustered population structure. Finally, what are the effects of communities? Communities have what we call edge effects. These are what happens in between the boundaries of one habitat and its neighbors. These boundaries in between communities are called ecotones. By observing edge effects and ecotones, we can see how communities and populations depend and rely on each other and how ecosystems work together.